Hi, I'm Nancy Linden, and this is my loft where I live. I have a lot of my work here, although I make it. My studio is upstairs in the same building. We've lived here for 6 or 7 years now, I guess, along with 4 cats. My husband and I and 4 cats, whom you may see at some point or other. This is my loft. This isn't actually my studio, but a lot of my art is here, and so we can look at some of that and talk about it. I've always painted all my life, but not seriously until, gosh, 15 years ago now, maybe 20, possibly. Yeah, I guess more like 20. I started deciding that I really need to focus on something if I'm going to ever achieve anything. sort of split my time alternating between painting and acting and writing, and about 20 years ago I decided I should focus on something if I'm ever going to actually accomplish anything, and so I decided to paint, and so since then I've been painting pretty seriously in Houston and now in Baltimore for the last 18 years, I guess. This is some of my work that you see around the loft. These farmers this is from a Dorothea Lange photograph of 6 tenant farmers who've been evicted off their land in Hardeman County, Texas. A lot of my work is based on Farm Security Administration photographs from the 30s and 40s. And tends to be kind of collagey and installation-y. Other work I make from models is more colorful and ordinary oil paintings, but the stuff that I do from black and white photographs gets kind of collagey and like that. You'll see a few things like that around here.
Now let me ask this question. So were you utilizing leftover material or material? Did you visualize this? You know what I'm saying? It's like this something that came about because there was something you had and you didn't want to try it, you wanted to use the wood? Or sort of explain how it came about.
Okay, this piece, I'm not actually sure how it evolved. The Dorothea Lange photograph is something that I've been intrigued with for some years, just the rhythm of the 6 figures standing there in front of the camera. In her photograph, they're standing against like a barn wall, I think. In my case, I freed them up and put them just a thin horizon line behind them, imagining that they're standing outside. But they're on a lot of different media, a lot of different surfaces, and done with a lot of different media. Really just, and I can't really say why. It seemed like something was more appropriate for one figure or something else for another figure. And so I ended up, there's some that are on plaster, there's some on wood, some on canvas, some on tar paper, which is kind of a fun thing to use because it interacts with you. You make a mark on the tar paper, you go away overnight and come back and the tar paper has changed your mark. So the figure on the end you'll see in a minute, was originally with oil bar, off-white oil bar, very pale oil bars, and it's gotten very dark gray for the most part. So, and it's all one piece, even though they're on several different supports, and they're actually separated, so they have to be hung together. There's space between them, which when I first installed them, which was at Resurgam, this great old gallery in South Baltimore that no longer exists, I had the horizon line continuing between them and continuing on the rest of the way around the room, and there was nothing else in the room but them and this horizon. So that's them.
That's a cool concept. Now, can we talk about this fellow over here?
The guy in the red stocking cap, I call it Railroad Night because I was just reading Jack Kerouac at the time. I feel like he's sitting in a railroad. He is actually from a model. There is a fellow that used to pose for me sometimes that painting is based on. But it just kind of evolved. Whether I'm using a model or working from a photograph or whatever I'm working on sort of evolves and changes as I'm working on it until it's like it's as if I'm trying to see into their lives, and I'm kind of digging through the canvas to get to something else. I'm digging through their image, so it doesn't really matter. They don't usually end up looking like the person, although I'm capable of doing that. But I'm kind of using them to get to some life I'm interested in or something. So that was a fellow that just kind of evolved into this old guy sitting in the railroad yard.
And how about the one back there that I liked? I kept saying it looked like Mom's Maybelline.
Oh, the laughing one. The laughing portrait is, well, not portrait, the laughing painting is based on 2 or 3 different Farm Security Administration photographs that I kind of put together. Actually, it's kind of a funny story. I had submitted to the Washington Convention Center when they were looking for large pieces to put up in their new atrium that they were building. And they didn't actually say, these must be pieces that we can buy, but they just said, let us see your work. So I sent a bunch of work to them and heard back, and they wanted this one piece. And I said, well, it's actually sold. And they said, well, can you get it? And I talked to the guy who bought it, and no, he didn't want to sell it. So I said to them, well, it just happens that I'm working on another piece that's much like that. And went home and started it. And I was going along frustrated. I spent all my time trying to think what they would like, what would please them, why did they like that piece, and what would they like in this piece. And it was awful. I couldn't get going with it. So I finally took a photograph of what I'd done so far, sent it to them, said, is this what you want? And they said no. So fine. So I just finished it the way I wanted it, ended up with that piece, and I love it.
That's a cool story.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I saw some that were on paper, weren't they? On like brown paper?
There's some boys behind you. There's on the other wall. There's some boys, 3 boys sitting drawn in pastel and charcoal on brown paper. That was really the first thing I did when I started getting serious about art. A friend in Galveston, Texas, loaned me his studio, a corner of his studio, and I worked on that piece. Again, it was from a Farm Security Administration photograph, that by Ben Shawn. And I kind of worked on them one at a time on this easel, not easel, it was a drawing board, drawing table. And people would come by and say, oh, is that a study for something you're making? And I said, no, this is a piece I'm making. And it ended up that piece. I've done everything wrong. It's on brown paper. I attached the brown paper together with rubber cement. All of these things are supposed to put a severe lifetime limitation on your work. But that was 20 years ago-ish, and they still seem to be fine, so I'm not too worried about them.
Okay, now what is the favorite medium you like to work in?
Well, I work with oil or charcoal. I've recently done some pieces on charcoal on frosted mylar, which is a really interesting thing to work on. It's plastic, but it's got a tooth, so the charcoal sticks to it, but you just touch it and the charcoal falls off right away, so you have to not touch it until you want to. But if you want to change it, you just kind of rub your hand over it and it's all gone. So you can just keep reworking it, reworking it, reworking it, reworking it. Eventually it develops a little bit of a shadow where you've been working, so it doesn't completely come off the next time. But you just keep playing with that and working, and eventually you get what you want and you spray it, just spray the hell out of it, and then it stays. So that's a lot of fun. But squishy things, I like charcoal, fat, thick, squishy charcoal and oil paint and like that. I also do a lot of collage-y things and a lot of installation stuff, not all of which is figurative. Nearly all of my work is figurative, but I do installation sort of things that are not figurative, although they do, in a sense, involve the figure because then people walk through them.
So explain installation to the audience.
Well, it's just anything. It's just normally like an environment. It's something that you're building rather than you're painting something. It's something that's actually there. And generally it's something you can move through, like an environment, like a room that's got window. One thing I did was windows hung throughout the room and papered over, and this space consisting of that.
So, who are some of your favorite female artists?
Female artists.
Well, you can say artists in general and then specify.
My heroes tend to be the abstract expressionists, despite the fact that that's not how I paint. But like de Kooning and Klein, and they're kind of two of my main ones. Diebenkorn I love. I do paint a little more like Diebenkorn, but my real idols are de Kooning and Klein and like that, which I paint nothing like. I mean, I would like to paint like them. I guess I have a more figurative way of working, but I want to do it. I work pretty figuratively, but my ethic is more abstraction, is more like an expressionistic abstraction. I would like to think that that's how my work comes out. I've never felt oppressed at all. So no, I don't. I mean, I sympathize with people who have been, and I know that often it's more difficult because women are expected to do more stuff. Well, I pretty much focused entirely on painting, and then a few years ago, I had occasion to do a monologue, and I thought, oh, this is fun. I remember doing this, and started taking acting classes and auditioning for things. And after a year or so, I started getting quite a few roles in community theater around Baltimore, and a couple of little movie things, and I've been an extra on Veep, which is a lot of fun. Not that you notice it, it's acting, but it's a lot of fun. Great people to work with. But so now I've come to focus a little more on that than on painting the last year or two. Actually, just now we've been going off sailing. We're about to go off to England and sail for the coming year around Europe and back to the Caribbean and back home next spring. So I really did not do much acting. I was not in a play all year, which hurts because we were gone until late fall, leaving again in early spring, and the time frame just didn't work out to do anything. So hopefully when I get back, I'll start working again in that regard.
And also, you also like to see? You like to see sailing? Okay, so talk a little bit about sailing.
Well, I'm second mate on a square rig ship out of Philadelphia. I'm going off next week to sail for 10 days with them. Then when I get back, my husband and I will both be leaving for England to get back on our boat, which we left over there at the end of last summer. He single-handed to Ireland from the Baltimore to Baltimore 65 and Not Dead Yet tour last summer. And I met him over there, and we sailed along Ireland and England and left the boat in England. Yeah, I think you have a little clip of him talking about that, his share of the voyage.
Welcome back, everyone. So, Lou, did you get much sleep over the course of this voyage?
I got enough. That's a question. That's really the most frequent question. What did you eat and when did you sleep? I slept generally in 2-hour blocks, usually at night. I'd get up, I'd set an alarm clock, get up every 2 hours, check the course, check the boat, look around, go back to bed. That generally took care of it. The greatest fear of every single-hander is being run over by a big ship. they won't even notice you. The greatest fear is having a big ship come into a port with your rig hanging on its bow or anchor, and that has happened.
And you were in the shipping lanes?
No. I made every attempt that I could to stay away from the shipping lanes. That being said, it's kind of difficult because the rum line course to Ireland is basically the shipping lane between the Chesapeake Bay and Europe. That being said, I think I only saw maybe 15 ships the entire time that I was out there. About 6 of those were at anchor in Norfolk when I left. But the AIS system allows you to see whatever ships are out there within VHF radio range, which is to say probably anywhere within a 20-mile radius. And that means that you know if there's a ship there, and you know what direction it's going in, you know what kind of ship it is, and likewise they can see you, which is much more important. Little boats like I sail on are very bad radar targets. You know, it doesn't matter what kind of, you could hang all sorts of radar reflectors all over it. It's still a bad radar target. It is. Actually, I got the AIS system because a good friend of mine, Rob Ruschak, who's captain of Gazella Pomero, insisted that I have one. He drives a large articulated petroleum barge. This is like a 5,000-ton barge that he drives all over the Atlantic, and he was adamant that I had to have one of these because he's had many experiences where he would actually see a small boat with his eyes before it popped up on the radar.
Is that right?
Yeah. So what this does essentially is that it takes away any excuse that they have for not seeing you. So if there's anybody on the bridge of the ship, and if that person doesn't have his head stuck in the Pakistani edition of Playboy, your chances of being run over are much less. And the upshot of that, getting back to your original question, is it made it a lot easier to sleep. When you know that you're the only terrestrial mammal in 1,000 square miles, that's a good thing.
Okay, everybody. Well, as you can see, we're here down in the heart of Baltimore in Inner Harbor. We're on USS Constellation, and it just happens that, Lou, I understand you've had some involvement with the restoration of the Constellation.
I did. I was the executive director for the first 3.5 years of this restoration of the ship. I came here in 1995 to do that.
And what were the main things that had to be done in that restoration?
Well, the fact of it is, by the time I got here, the ship had been completely downrigged because they were afraid that, basically bits would fall out of the sky and land on people. The ship was hogged 36 inches. That means that its ends had dropped down from its midsection about 3 feet, and it was pumping about 6,000 gallons a day just to stay afloat.
Wow. And by downrig, you don't mean that the whole masts were off?
Oh yeah, everything was
down. Oh,
everything was gone. They had all been pulled out because they were all rotten. Everything everywhere was rotten.
So you had to replace all that. What about the hull itself? You were talking about the...
Well, the ships have a natural tendency to hog. If you think about it,
what does hog mean?
Hog means that where the ends drop down from the midsection, so that the keel goes like that.
By the warping of the...
Well, if you think about it, ships are supported by their buoyancy.
Right.
And their buoyancy is a direct function of the volume of water that's displaced. And if you think about it, ships are skinnier at the ends than they are in the middle.
Sure.
So there's more buoyancy in the middle supporting the ship than there is at the ends. So there's what they call a hogging moment, which is to say the weight of the ends pulling down because they don't have as much buoyancy to support them. So all ships have a tendency to hog. When they lose structural strength, then they actually begin to hog.
We're going to be taking another break right now.
In couple of weeks, we're going to be off back to England and get back on the boat and sail it until we get home. It's a long process around southern Europe and through the Caribbean and home again probably next spring. That's kind of what's next. Well, it was nice talking with you. You can see my artwork if you want to on bakerartistawards.com and then look up my name. It's not my own website. It's a thing that artists in Baltimore can show their work on. It's a wonderful, wonderful website. I think there's a lot of artists on it, but just look up Nancy Linden on it and you can see my work. And I'd just like to thank you now and say top of the morning to you.